the legendary Betty and Barney Hill case. Let's dive in. So we're going back to the year 1961 on the 19th of September at around 10:30 p.m. Betty and Barney were coming back from a vacation in Canada and they were driving back. Betty, Barney and their dog Delcy were travelling along Route 3 through New Hampshire. Now Betty was a social worker and Barney was a postal worker. Barney had also previously served in the Second World War and he had an interest in aviation mechanics. They were members of their local Unitarian congregation and they were both members of the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, which is a civil rights organisation that was formed in 1909. And Barney was also on the board for his local commission of civil rights. Now, they were both respected and well-known people in their community. I think it's fair to say that Betty and Barney weren't seeking any attention drawn to themselves, especially a subject on alien abduction. Anyway, back to the evening in question.
We were driving along on Route 3 and it was a very clear night and the moon was very almost full and very bright. And the sky was very clear, and we could see the stars easily.
Suddenly, we began to see a strange light in the sky, which was maneuvering in a very erratic pattern. This light began flying along beside us.
Barney was also aware of this light, but he was of the opinion that it was either a satellite or a commercial flight. This light seemed to follow their car as it turned around corners and rounded bends. Betty urged Barney to stop the car so they could get a closer look, which he did. Barney stopped the car at a scenic area called Twin Mountain. This was also a chance to take their adopted dog Delcy for a quick walk too. Now they had a pair of 7x50 binoculars with them. Betty took these to take a look at the object. When she looked at the object, it was solid and it was flashing in multicoloured lights and appeared to be spinning as well. Barney then took the binoculars to look at this object, but he quickly changed his mind and decided this wasn't a commercial flight as it began to fly towards them at a rapid rate. At this point the couple and their dog got into their car and drove away. They kept their eyes on this object, which seemed to be bouncing erratically around the sky. The couple then began to hear strange beeping sounds that seemed to be coming from the trunk area of their car. Now Barney had a handgun in the glove box of the car. He decided to get this gun and put it in its holster. This object then descended towards their car, at which point Barney stopped the car at an area called Indian Head.
And did this for about 30 miles until we came to an area known as Indian Head. And at that place, this light left the top of the mountain, came out over the highway, and stopped in midair directly in front of us. Barney jumped out of the car with the binoculars in an attempt to try to identify this craft.
So I got out of the car and took the pair of binoculars, 7x50 crescent binoculars, and stepped away. And as I raised the binoculars, looking over the roof of the car from my position on the ground, the object shifted across the highway, where it now, in making the shift, it also had a descent motion that brought it to what I roughly estimated as about 100 feet in the air. And then I began walking across the highway into the field. I walked quite a distance in the field, and I saw what I thought were figures standing by this huge plate glass looking back at me. I couldn't believe it.
Barney then stated that he saw red lights extending from both sides of this craft, and then he saw something descending from the craft towards the ground. The craft then began to descend closer towards them.
I dashed back to the car screaming to Betty that, oh my gosh, I said, it's going to capture us, is what I said. There was a series of beeps, and then later there was another series of beeps. Betty asked me if I now believed in flying saucers, and I told her, don't be ridiculous, of course not. We continued then to proceed on to Portsmouth, and we arrived. We both felt very uncomfortable and clean. I don't think I mentioned to Betty how I felt, but I felt clammy, as if I had fallen into something very, very filthy.
Now, when we arrived home, we had many puzzles. The tops of Barney's shoes were scuffed. Our watches had stopped functioning. There were highly polished spots in the trunk of the car. But the biggest mystery of all was the fact that it had taken us 7 hours to drive 190 miles.
Betty also noted that her dress was torn, various stitches were torn, and the area around the zipper was also damaged. She also saw that there was a weird kind of pink powder on the dress too. They also saw that there were these unexplained circular marks on the trunk of their vehicle.
What were these objects on the back of your car that bothered you so much?
Well, when I went out to look at the car, to check it with the compass, as this physicist had suggested, I found some round, highly polished spots on the trunk of the car. When I put the compass near them, it just reacted erratically. And
Spun around?
yes, and then when I moved it away, the compass reacted normally.
We'd been asked if others had seen these spots, and there are. There was a sergeant living in our apartment building at the time. He and his wife, they knew he had been on vacation, so they came down, and Betty told him she had gone out, and she was quite upset about what she had seen, and was trying to get me to go out, and I wouldn't, so they went out and took a look, and they came in quite excited, insisting that I go out and look on the trunk of Betty's car. So when I went out, I also, too, saw these large shiny spots. And I didn't put any, well, it wasn't important. They were just shiny spots. I didn't know how they got there, but I didn't try to even understand how they were there.
Now, the Hills didn't want to go public with this incident and told a limited number of trusted people about this incident at the time. 10 days after the incident, Betty started having vivid nightmares.
About 10 days after the sighting itself, I had a series of dreams that lasted for about 5 nights. And these were somewhat upsetting and puzzling to me. At first, I thought of them only as bad dreams. But then when the scientists noticed that there was this period of time, then I began to wonder if my dreams might have been my way of trying to recall what had happened. In my dreams, we were driving along, we were stopped by a group of men on the highway, taken out of the car, taken aboard the UFO, underwent physical examination, and then were released. These were the dreams that I had.
Betty began to get obsessed about finding out what had actually happened to them, and she came across the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. She reported this incident to them after discussing the matter with Barney, and they also reported the incident to the Air Force too. They feared that they may have been infected with radiation, and they worried that other health problems may develop too. Barney told this committee that the whole incident was out of this world and that these creatures were somehow not human. An astronomer who was a member of this committee by the name of Walter N Webb decided to interview Barney and Betty, and this was quite an extensive interview which lasted around 6 hours. Now, during this interview, Barney was very anxious and upset, and he couldn't really remember what happened or explain the loss of time. Barney was worried that his subconscious was hiding memories from him. After the interview, Mr. Webb concluded that the Hills were telling the truth as they remembered it, and any discrepancies or mistakes from the two stories were just down to human error. So after the report into this interview was completed, it was recommended that Betty and Barney undergo hypnotherapy. Now, this was a few years after this incident, so it took this long to get to this stage. And the hypnotherapy sessions were carried out on the 4th of January 1964 by a hypnotherapist and psychiatrist by the name of Benjamin Simon. Betty and Barney were hypnotised separately. Now, there are raw tapes of these sessions on YouTube, and I'll leave links to both Barney and Betty's hypnotherapy sessions in the description.
Well, there were the beeping sounds, and then I apparently went into some kind of daze, some kind of condition like this. And we're driving along, and Barney suddenly made a sharp left-hand turn off the highway, and we ran around a curve, and there was a group of men standing in the highway. And under hypnosis, my first thought was, there must be an automobile accident. And then the car motor died. And Barney was trying to start the car, and he wasn't able to. And these men were coming closer, and they divided. And at this moment, I panicked. I became very frightened. I tried to open the car door, thinking I would get out run and hide in the woods until they were gone. Just as I opened the door, they stepped over where I was.
Could you remember under hypnosis what these men looked like?
Not at that moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, go ahead.
Then they took me out of the car, and I went into sort of another deeper daze of some sort.
I have a trance.
Yes. And then I was more or less pulled myself out of this, or at least partially. And I found myself walking in the woods with a man on each side of me, and some in front, some behind me. And then in back of me was Barney, and he was like sleepwalking. And there were these two men more or less holding him up. We walked through this long path in the woods until we came to the craft that was sitting on the ground.
By the time we had arrived at the craft, I was fighting.
We went up the ramp, and
I might add, ramp was never mentioned in Betty's dreams, but we both seemed to share the idea that we had been going up a ramp.
She states that she was led aboard this craft and then went down a corridor into a small examination room, which had a desk and a small examination table in it.
I was taken into the first room, Barney into the second room, where we were given, as the leader, as I call him, gave us testing.
And while I was in there, they did what we call a fairly simple physical examination.
She said that her dress was removed and these creatures struggled with the zipper. These creatures then laid her down on a table.
The first thing they did was they examined my arm. Apparently they were looking at my skin, and they seemed to be making a lot of comments among themselves, as if they were quite excited about this. And they brought over what I called, I've never seen one, so I don't know, but I call it a microscope with a camera attached. Then after that, they took hair samples on my fingernails. They checked my eyes, hair, my ears, nose, and things like this. And they looked over my hands and my feet, particularly my feet, quite thoroughly. Then they said they were going to test my nervous system. And they brought over some kind of a machine, which they touched.
Were you fully dressed?
No. They took off my dress and my shoes. And then during this, what they call the checking of my nervous system, I had a slip on. And they pulled my slip up and did this testing.
She was then shown a long needle, and she asked the creature that appeared to be in charge of the examination what they were going to do with this needle. And she was told that they were going to perform a pregnancy test on her. She was concerned that this needle would cause a lot of pain, but she was assured by this examiner that it wouldn't hurt. This needle was then inserted into her navel, and she said the pain was unbelievable. It was extreme. She cries out on the tape. She tells this examiner that she's in a lot of pain. He then gets his hand and moves it up towards her eyes, and the pain goes away.
At this point, the examiner came running back into the room and opened my mouth and started tugging at my teeth. And I said to the leader, "What is he doing?" And he said, "We're very, very puzzled."
Barney's teeth were removable and mine were not.
During this examination, these creatures tried to take Betty's teeth out, and when she asked them what they were doing, they said that they had taken Barney's teeth out and were trying to do the same to her. Betty had to explain to these creatures that Barney wore dentures and she didn't, and that they had taken his dentures out, and these creatures didn't know what dentures were. Now, both Barney and Betty stated that there appeared to be a leader amongst these aliens, and during Betty's hypnotherapy sessions, she asks this leader where they come from. Now, I've read a couple of different versions of this. In Betty's tapes, she states that this leader gets a map from a wall compartment of his own volition and shows Betty this map and asks Betty where does she think her planet is on this map. To which Betty said she laughed and said, "I don't know." And she asked this leader where he was from. And this leader said to her, "Well, if you don't know where you are, there's little point in me telling you where we are." In another version, this leader shows Betty a section of the map, pointing out a star system where he stated they were from. Whilst under hypnosis, Betty drew what she remembered this star system to look like. Also, in Betty's hypnotherapy session, she recalled asking this leader if she could take something back with her as proof of what had happened. She saw a big book in the room and asked if she could take this book, to which the leader agreed that she could. Betty stated that when she and Barney were taken out of the craft, the leader came to her and told her that she couldn't take this book with her after all, because all the other aliens on board the ship objected to her doing this. She states that she got very upset with the leader because he promised that she could take this book, but then she stated to him that she understood. She also asked this leader if they would be coming back, to which the leader replied it wasn't up to him. Now, after these hypnotherapy sessions were concluded, Benjamin Simon diagnosed psychological aberration. He didn't say that they were lying or making it up, but based this diagnosis on a variety of symptoms that they both were showing during these hypnotherapy sessions. Barney then recalled being in a forest with a group of men who approached his car. Both he and Betty were being led through the woods by these men, and Betty was in front of him. Then Barney recalls being told to close his eyes, and as he did this he saw two eyes coming towards his, and when he closed his eyes he said it felt like these two eyes pushed into his eyes. During these sessions, Barney recalled that he was led onto the craft and to a brightly lit examination room which had odd-shaped walls. He said that there was an examination table.
The table that I described was small, and obviously the difference in our heights could be the answer.
Well, how tall were these men?
I estimate, I said they were about as tall as Betty, but this would mean that they
What are you, 5'1"?
about 4.5 to 5 feet.
I'm 5 feet.
5 feet.
Yes, and I'm 5'8". So that the 3 inches difference was quite a difference. And I said that the table was too small.
And he was stripped and then strapped to this table. He said that as he was examined by these creatures, he had hair, skin and nail samples removed from his body.
The kind of examination that I had been given is a scraping of the skin, and I had been turned over.
He stated that he was also laid on his front and could feel his spine being touched by these creatures. He also said that he had wires connected to his body.
They were interested in body openings, and a cup-like object was placed against my genitals. I'm very conscious about my teeth. I was very upset about I only got as far as saying something went into my mouth, and I did not bother to tell the doctor, and he did not press this as to what was happening, but I can only think now that this would have been when my teeth would have been extracted. And
Pulled out.
Pulled out. Yeah, I should have said pulled out because they're dentures. Yes, and so they weren't extracted, they had been. But, and this would have been the extent of the examination.
An amateur astronomer by the name of Marjorie Fish, who was also an elementary school teacher, took great interest in this case, particularly the star map that Betty drew whilst under hypnosis of the star system that the leader said they came from. Marjorie Fish, after close study of Betty's drawing, concluded that it was highly probable that Betty had drawn the star system Zeta Reticuli, which is visible in the southern sky as a very faint double star system with the naked eye. And this star system is approximately 39.3 light years from Earth. Now, Betty stated that she knew nothing of this star system before this incident. Famous astronomer Carl Sagan, however, has other ideas about this drawing. So what do you think of his conclusion? Let me know in the comments.
While on board, Betty had noticed a book written in an unknown hieroglyphic writing. She was also shown a strange window through which she could see a glowing pattern of dots connected with lines. It was, they told her, a star map displaying the routes of interstellar commerce. Afterwards, the Hills were released and permitted to return home, or at least this is their story. Now, believers find this account compelling, or at least plausible, chiefly because of the alleged star map. Here's what Betty Hill said it looked like. Now, why would anybody take this seriously? Because here is a real map. widely publicized by UFO enthusiasts, of 15 selected nearby stars, including the sun, as seen from one particular vantage point in space. This map includes stars that were first cataloged several years after Betty Hill recalled what she says she saw in the alien ship. Her map required, we are told, information that was not then available on the Earth. There is a resemblance between the two maps, but that's mainly because the lines corresponding to navigation routes have been copied from the Hill map onto the real star map. If we were to substitute some other set of lines for the Hill lines, we find that the eye suddenly is biased against seeing any agreement between the two maps at all. To make an objective test, however, let's remove the lines altogether. And then there's very little resemblance left. But these particular stars are selected from a large catalog of star positions. Our vantage point in space is also selected to make the best possible fit with the Hill map. If you can pick and choose from a large number of stars, viewed from any vantage point in space you want, you can always find something resembling the pattern you're looking for. I'm surprised that nobody could find a better fit to the Hill map. The Hills' own psychiatrist described their story as a kind of dream. There's no corroborating evidence. The star map argument is worthless. And yet, this is one of the best attested cases of UFO close encounters.
Now, I can't find any mention of what happened to their dog Delcy, whether Delcy suffered any symptoms as a result of this incident. If you're aware of anything that happened to Delcy, leave me a comment. Now, over the years, various laboratory tests have been conducted on Betty's damaged dress, and none of these tests have been able to identify the pink powdery substance that Betty found on the dress. It's also interesting to note that the American Air Force tracked an unidentified object in the area of where this incident occurred at 2:14 AM on the 20th of September. So what do you think about that? Now, there are lots and lots of videos about the Betty and Barney Hill case on the internet. All of these videos say different things about this subject. I'll leave links to some of the videos I've researched in the description. What do you think about this incident? Betty and Barney Hill, a normal married couple, both of good standing. Would they really want all this attention brought to them, especially around the subject of alien abduction? Different people have different theories on this. But what do you think? You let me know in the comments. If you know more information about this case that I haven't mentioned, also let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.